So the flight response is a really big one, and it's really about the horse surviving. And from the horse's point of view, he's quite neophobic. What that means, he's typically scared of new things. Not all horses are, but many horses are. And the more clear the horse's world is in training, the less neophobic he will be. There's one thing that's really useful to think of, and that is that when a horse is afraid of something and runs away, what rewards that or what reinforces that running away behaviour? It's just two things: how fast he ran and how far. So if he, for example, shies away from the side of the arena and then not only shies but scoots 10 metres because his stop button's not that good when the child tried to stop him, they will have a high coefficient of learning from that trigger in the future, most likely. But if the horse has good brakes and he only gets to jump sideways and runs a metre, it will be less embedded in memory. So it's worth thinking, instead of thinking, oh, well, he doesn't like, agapanthus flowers or pussycats, just think more that these are triggers that made him run. It will really help you get to know, and that's been the basis of my work. And in saying that, this understanding of equitation science is now, this is the first time it's being rolled out in Pony Club, but it is really going around the world a lot. I teach in 14 countries in Europe, and it's gaining a lot of traction because, as a good friend of mine, Michael Drapak, mentioned to me just recently, that he's a great businessman, and he said that, if we don't pay attention to ecological aspects and ethical aspects, as well as be productive in what we, the things have got to work. If we don't pay attention to those things, whatever we do in life, it just won't work in terms of, public acceptance. And so that's really part of this. And this poster I have here, I was going to put it up. This is made by the Dutch. It was a competition about the 10 principles I'm going to be talking about, which are the 10 principles of equitation science, to show children in Netherlands and have it as a poster in their tack rooms about horse behaviour and just safe handling around horses. Back to the flight response. So the more he practices it, the better he gets at it. So we just got to be careful of that, because sometimes we think, we'll just let him run. And many people say, these sort of pop psychologists, not so much with a formal in understanding animal behaviour. It really is important to recognise that the more he practices running, the better he gets at it. The flight response has a range of behavioural components. It can be bucking, leaping, shying, swerving, all those sorts of things. They all have in common one thing, that the legs did it. If we had control of the legs, none of those things would happen. Or they might happen. We'd be able to stop them before they got too far. I really relied on that in my work going around the country in the 90s and early 2000, where I would go to each state riding difficult horses. And when I started to learn about controlling the flight response, it really saved my neck. I've been in hospital in most states, and after that, when I started to pay attention to these things and stop thinking that I was just a good event rider and I could get on anything, and I didn't even need to know what it did, I was just going to hang on, it soon came undone. So, we do need, it does help to know a lot of these things, and there's much you can do in hand with horses. You can really teach horses to have a good stop button, because if the bit's in the horse's mouth, then if you teach him to stop from your reins with the bit, you're going to be improving his behaviour under saddle. It's the same mouth, same horse. Okay, talking about the equine herd, we really talk about social groups in a scientific way rather than a herd of horses, because they don't really exist in herds very much. A few instances around the world of horses that have been gathered together, but don't forget, the horses are a domestic animal. There are no wild horses. There are plenty of feral ones, but all the feral ones are really domestic horses gone wild. We've got rid of the wild ones long ago, probably because the ones we didn't want to ride or handle, we ate. The herd structure is much more complex than just thinking of it as an alpha horse, because what we know from all of the studies that have been done is that horse A can dominate horse B, which can dominate horse C, but horse C might dominate horse A. It can be really complex and interwoven. Often we don't see it if we have the horse in pairs. One will dominate the other all the time, but it's very much resource driven too, and it's true for dogs as well. The studies on wolves are the same. So we've got to be careful that we don't extrapolate that too much. There's a whole new other talk I do about that, about why we are sucked in to think that the horse just lives in a hierarchical structure like the army, but it really isn't true. Social animals care for each other, and it's much more about survival of everybody rather than someone just taking all the resources themselves. So I think we need to be careful that horses probably don't see us as part of their social group. You know, when we let them go, they're quite happy to just run off and be with their mates. Dogs are different. But horses still need to be with their social group, and it's an important element for them. Okay, you can read more on this as we go through, so don't worry. I'm just giving you the general gist of how we're going in this syllabus. So, in terms of our toolkit as trainers, these again are things that are not new to you. There's no new part I'm promoting in equitation science at all. It's just that we're recognising that we can break things down into certain parts, and breaking things down is very valuable for teaching. So we call these basic foundation responses, things like stopping, which includes all elements of deceleration, slowing, shortening, stepping back. So there's that stop response, the go response, there's all elements of the go, accelerating, up the gait, faster, and longer in the stride. All of those things we can differentiate, and we can decide to teach certain things to certain age groups. Probably it isn't important for little children to learn lengthening, so we haven't included that for little children, but we add it as the syllabus goes on. So basically we've got stopping, going forwards, turning the shoulders left and right, so that's our turns, and turning the hindquarters left and right as well. And turning the hindquarters left and right is what we call yield or leg yield, but it's still a turn. A horse can change direction by turning his hindquarters only, or by turning his forequarters. And generally in the European sports, we don't teach them to change direction by turning the hindquarters so much as changing the forelegs. But in reining, it's a different kettle of fish altogether. So it's important because one of the things we want to do and look at Pony Club is to make it more broad, so that it's not only appealing to the eventers and the dressage and the show jumpers, which is my background, but also that we can give kids a chance to learn to do working equitation or reining or polo or whatever horse sport they want. I think that's the most important thing the Pony Club can do, apart from teaching excellent horsemanship skills. I think this is very valuable because when you think about the advent of interschools, which is really fun for kids and it's good to do, it's a little dangerous because kids are not learning horsemanship. And this is the place where they learn it. So this is why it's really important that we are, I think, world leaders in this. So all of these basic movements of stopping and going and turning the shoulders left and right and turning the hindquarters left and right are basically fundamentally trained by the reins and legs. They become hijacked later by the rider's seat and position, that's true. But it's really important that we do recognise that. If we're galloping toward, if our child's on a pony galloping towards a freeway out of control, we're not going to say, use your outside leg or use your seat correctly. We're going to say, pull on that right rein, make him turn. And we do, or probably we'll say, pull on both reins and use your brakes first, but if that fails. So there are these fundamental things of pressure release. And you see, this goes back into what behavioural scientists have been saying for a long time, that about all elements of learning is that operant conditioning is really the motherland of learning. It's where we learn all the things that we need to learn by reward, by reinforcement, trial and error learning, all of those things. And that's how we train the reins and legs. Now, the conversion of those pressures is important, that we don't just teach the kids to pull on the reins, because that's terrible. And you know that, you've been teaching this for your life. But how do we convert them? And it's really just because we begin with the light aid always. And that's just classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is just about whatever comes first. They learn. There are other tools too that we teach our animals whatever we want by shaping. We gradually build the behaviours. So we make things really obvious in shaping and gradually build them up. And the final one is habituation. We try to teach horses not to be scared of things that they're normally afraid of, to make them safer to ride.